The early 2000s were filled to the brim with Mario RPG games. After the big cultural impact of Super Mario RPG in 1996, the game was able to have several successors over the years, starting with the N64 with the Paper Mario series, which is still getting releases to this very day, but in 2003, a really small studio decided to take a crack of another Mario RPG successor, and thus the Mario and Luigi series was born. But here's an interesting fact. Unlike Paper Mario, where it's made by completely different developers, the developers behind the Mario and Luigi series were people who used to work on Super Mario RPG on the Super Nintendo. Now, if you're not very familiar with the Mario and Luigi series, well, it's a series where you control both Mario and Luigi as they go across these vast different worlds, with each of the brothers being controlled by one designated button. It does something that's very similar to the other Mario RPG series, but it does something very unique to really stand apart. And I've always considered Mario and Luigi as the best Mario RPG series because it always had a great consistent quality to them. But unfortunately, a few years ago, the original studio that made the series closed down after filing for bankruptcy, causing the whole series to go into a weird limbo state for a few years, until now, by some miracle, a brand new Mario and Luigi entry was just announced. So I thought it'd be fun just to finally talk about this series, since this was the Mario RPG games I grew up with. So I think for the rest of the year, I'm going to go through the entire Mario and Luigi series, ending things off with the release of Mario and Luigi Brothership. So I feel like it's appropriate to talk about the very first one that started it all, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. Now, this is considered one of the most acclaimed Mario RPG games, since it set up a lot of groundworks for a lot of things like gameplay, style, and characters, with the last part introducing so many memorable characters that people still talk about to this very day. Now, for me personally, I had this game since I was a kid, as I owned a couple of GBA games, and I was able to play it thanks to my DS Lite, and while my first ever Mario & Luigi game was Bowser's Inside Story, I was able to snag this game alongside with partners in time, and I thought it was a pretty good time. But it's been a while since I've played these two games. With Superstar's case, the last time I've played it was with the 3DS remake. But for this video, I'm mainly going to be focusing on the GBA version, but I'm going to be using footage of the 3DS remake as well, since they're pretty much the same game. And as for the GBA version, I'm going to be recording it based on the NSO version, and I've got to say, it's kind of weird playing a Mario & Luigi game on a big screen TV like this. And I'll be probably saying this again when we see the series' first console entry this fall. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. So the story of this game is that an ambassador from the Bean Bean Kingdom arrives at the Mushroom Kingdom to give Peach a gift. It was supposedly a gift for the queen, but it turns out it was a trick by this evil witch named Cackletta and her assistant Fawful, who was able to shoot this poisonous gas at Peach and suck it back up, leaving the poor girl unconscious, with the devious duo escaping from parts unknown with the kingdom in panic, with a local Toad rushing to Mario's house to get help. Unfortunately, he came in an inconvenient time as Mario was taking a shower. Toad warns him that Peach is in trouble, and so Mario rushes all the way outside to get his clothes, while dragging Luigi across through the entire kingdom. But as soon as they arrive, Bowser shows up ready to capture the princess, but after a quick fight, it was immediately halted once they figure out what's going on with Peach. So it turns out that the machine Fawful used on Peach stole her voice and replaced it with literal bombs, as every time she even speaks, it caused an explosion. Bowser realizes because of Peach's condition, he is unable to kidnap her because she'll most likely blow up his castle. And so he decided to have a truce with Mario to head to the Bean Bean Kingdom to find Cackletta. Luckily, Bowser is fully prepared with an entire airship and fleet, while Mario brings Luigi along much to his dismay. However, later that night on Bowser's airship, they were attacked by Fawful, who destroys the entire fleet, causing the trio to crash land. But luckily they weren't too far of their location, so after a few scuffles, they successfully arrive at the Bean Bean Kingdom, although Bowser wasn't very lucky. Eventually, after rescuing the prince of the kingdom on top of the mountain, they arrived at the center of the town, where it's revealed that Cackletta has caused so much trouble at the kingdom, as she was able to steal their legendary Beanstar and mutate their queen into this hulking beast. And so, it's up to Mario and Luigi to go after Cackletta and save the kingdom. Now, the premise of this game is pretty solid since we're not in the Mushroom Kingdom anymore. That means we get to meet more original and weird characters along the way. With some of them, you're meeting more red and green duos who teach Mario and Luigi certain tricks, while others can be considered one of the most iconic characters in Mario history, like the villain Fawful. And I really adored this guy with his big grin and how he speaks in this hilariously broken English way. His dialogue single-handedly makes him very recognizable, like his iconic catchphrase, "I have fury!" Pablo is another very funny character I really like, as he's this short-tempered burglar that the brothers encounter occasionally, who most of the time argues with his partner that happens to be Bowser, who's suffering from amnesia, and so he does not recognize the Mario brothers. And then there's Prince Peasley, who is essentially the hero of the Bean Bean Kingdom and a goodwill person. They also play a somewhat friendly rivalry with the Mario brothers in this game, as every time they're in a predicament, Peasley will claim that he's the one who solved it first, only for the Mario brothers to beat them to the punch. But I feel like the biggest highlight for this character is every time he plays off with Luigi, who really seems to idolize the prince in this game to the point where it just straight up feeling homoerotic. I think the part that really made me laugh when Peasley declared a bet with Mario brothers, and then he immediately starts poking Luigi's rear with a sword, and he's really into it. If I can describe Superstar Saga's story as one thing, it is definitely a comedy, as the game doesn't really take itself seriously and have an overly in-depth story, but instead tries to be really funny, and I'll give them credit that a lot of the jokes in this game do work really well. And I especially love the slapstick comedy that they do with Luigi in this game. This Green Man is basically the definition of a comic relief character, as his cowardly persona that was introduced in Luigi's Mansion worked wonderfully in this game. And I think the funniest gag in this game is that since Luigi doesn't go on many adventures compared to Mario, he's really not well recognized in different kingdoms. Hell, even Bowser can't even remember his name, which is honestly hilariously sad for Luigi. Like, before they were able to head out to the Bean Bean Kingdom, Bowser thought Luigi wanted to sign up to the Koopa Kingdom. But my favorite joke in this game is surprisingly a joke about exchange rates, where Peasley waged 900 billion coins for Mario and Luigi to wager, and once he actually gave him the 90 billion Mushroom Kingdom coins, it turns out that in Bean Bean Kingdom, it's only worth 99. That is hilarious. Alright, so as for the gameplay in Superstar Saga, as I mentioned before, it is another spiritual successor to Super Mario RPG. But unlike that and Paper Mario, this game tries to do something way more unique, which is that instead of having a big cast of party members from Gino and Mallow to Vivian and Goombella, in this game you have only 2 party members, which are the titular brothers, with their movements being pretty much identical from each other, with each of them having their own button with the 2 GBA face buttons, with Mario having the A button and Luigi having the B button, although for this game specifically you can change the order of the brothers. And as for the controls, while Mario and Luigi can do a lot of different things in this game, of course you can have the 2 brothers jump and use their trademark hammers, but also they can work together to do unique abilities, like Luigi being able to do a high jump, which allows them to get to higher places. But if you swap around with the brothers with Mario in the back, he is able to do a small little spin jump, which allows the brothers to hover in the air for a bit. This even goes with the hammers as well, as if you have Luigi behind you, he can use his hammer to turn Mario into Mini Mario, which allows him to travel through small places. And if Mario is behind, he can whack Luigi on the ground, which allows him to sneak through grates, or he's able to find these elusive beans. Now these things are freaking everywhere in this game, which makes sense as you're traveling through the Bean Bean Kingdom. But unlike something like mushrooms where they heal you, you take the beans that you collect along the way to this place called the Star Beans Cafe, and use them to make coffee, the most important drink in the kingdom, which allows you to raise certain stats depending on the drink that you've made. But also every time you brew in a new drink, you also get to meet with the owner of the cafe, which is Professor Egad, who's taken up shop in the Bean Bean Kingdom, with the coffee maker being his latest invention, and every time he shows up it's usually a funny encounter, with a lot of great callbacks to Luigi's Mansion, like the occasional ghost showing up to scare Luigi. There was even a friendly ghost to show up to try out the new coffee, and it was so good that the ghost just went to heaven. And I also love the GBA remix of Luigi's Mansion theme. That's a really nice touch. But I think what was very interesting about this section that people talk about is what the original plan was for the cafe. As originally you were able to encounter other Nintendo characters like Olimar, Fox, and Link that will be able to give you various rewards. But even though they were cut, you can still see remnants of this original idea in the final game, which are the rewards themselves that Egad gives you after giving him a delicious, hot, refreshing... Okay, sorry about that. Now as for the various areas of the Bean Bean Kingdom themselves, a lot of them do have their unique biomes. I like how the entirety of the kingdom is pretty much one big circle, with the main center point being the town itself. and each of the areas hold unique NPCs that are pretty much distinct to that area. Same with the various enemies you'll find along the way, which leads to us to the game's battle system. Now for the combat in this game, it's the same turn-based battles you would see in other Mario RPG games, with Mario using his usual attacks like the jump and hammers, but what sets this game apart from the others is, for one, the characters do these little dances. Since this game is about Mario and Luigi working together, this leads to their special attacks having you do these quick QTEs to deal massive damage to enemies. And I like how each of the brothers have unique movesets to set them apart, which based on their special abilities. Like Luigi being able to turn Mario into Mini Mario in the Overworld, and this was translated really well as a move to attack enemies. But what's interesting is that if you use these special moves a certain amount of times, the Mario brothers will learn an advanced version of them, which is pretty much a harder but more powerful version of the similar bro attack. But as for when the enemy is attacking themselves, instead of just blocking them like in Paper Mario, you're actually able to dodge their attacks by either jumping or using your hammer to counterattack. And with this, I personally prefer the Mario and Luigi battle system over the Paper Mario one, as since there are so many different enemies in this game, a lot of them have their unique attacks, which always keeps you on your toes. Especially with the various bosses in this game, which can be very damn difficult at times. But man, nothing feels more satisfying as doing that final blow and see them explode with all these stars around. The only big criticism I have with this battle system is that since this is the first game of the series, so it's pretty much first game syndrome, this is probably one of the easier Mario and Luigi games. As since the bro attacks deal a lot of damage, there's nothing stopping you of using it for regular enemies. Of course, since this is a special attack, they do have a magic meter, aka the bro points. But at the very most, you're only going to be spending 3 bro points just for one of these special attacks. And since this is an RPG and you level up a lot of your stats, that means at the near end you'll have so many bro points that you might as well just use the special attacks. And this is why I kinda lean more favorably with the 3DS remake, as this version gives you a better challenge with the bosses and enemies, by raising the requirements of the bro points for each the move. And for the boss's case, if you deplete their health halfway, they'll enter this little rage mode, where they'll introduce brand new attacks, which honestly caught me off guard. But I think my favorite battles in this game is really the viruses from Dr. Mario, where they have this thing, if you match all the viruses' colors together, they'll immediately die. That is honestly a really cool detail, I really love that. Alright, so continuing on with the story. After figuring out a cure for the Queen's condition, she explains to the brothers about the legendary Beanstar, as it's a sleeping entity that is able to grant wishes, but in order to wake it up, you need to have a voice of beauty. Which is why Cackletta stole Peach's voice in the first place, so she can wake up the star. But luckily they were able to figure out Cackletta's whereabouts with the Beanstar, and Mario and Luigi heads deep into Hoo Hoo University, where the evil witch is ready to use Peach's voice to power up the star, but suddenly it reacts negatively to Peach's voice. And while Cackletta was distracted, the Mario Brothers were able to ambush her, and was nearly successful at taking her out until Fawful comes in and absorbs her energy, leaving her into this ghostly state. And then Peasley shows up to pretty much finish them off. And so, without Cackletta, the Mario Bros. Then rush all the way down to the basement where they are able to find Pobble and Bowser taking the star. And after one battle against them, the Beanstar starts becoming enraged and flies up in the sky, with the Mario Brothers and burglars latching onto them where they all fall down to the kingdom. Ironically, right after Bowser realizes who he really is. And so they all fall down and the starbeam then scatters across the land. After finding their way off this deserted island, they were able to head back to the Bean Kingdom, where they heard the news by Peasley that Princess Peach is coming to the kingdom to visit them. And since Cackletta is pretty much gone, they pretty much had nothing to worry about. But little did they know, things are going to get a lot worse from here. So after fixing up some issues at the airport, Peach finally arrives at the Bean Kingdom, where it's revealed that this entire time, Peach's voice was never stolen in the first place. As Peasley knew that Cackletta was going after Peach, so he warned her. And the voice that Cackletta stole turns out to be Birdo in disguise, which explains why the Beanstar reacted negatively. Hey, I'm currently recording this while I'm editing, and I just realized something. If Toadsworth knew that Peach's voice was never stolen, why didn't he just stop Mario before he head out to the Bean Kingdom? It's not that much big of a deal, but I just thought it was a weird plot hole. And so while Prince Peasley tries to find the remains of the Beanstar, the Mario Brothers and Peach decide to visit a little fungi town, which is pretty much a home away from home as it's a small toad town. So after going through this short escort mission to prevent Peach getting kidnapped, they were able to visit a town where they pretty much just chillax and just play around. Oh hey Gino. But unfortunately for Mario's case, he got food poisoning, as since he's not used to eating foods from a different kingdom, he's essentially going to be turned into a literal bean if Luigi doesn't find a cure for him. But as soon as he was able to find it, things got even more dire when Peach gets kidnapped. But not from Bowser, but Bowletta, who states that she'll return Princess Peach to the Mario Brothers if they were able to collect the Beanstar. And this leads to the second half of Superstar Saga. With the first half, it's kind of linear where you need to go, but after you learn the final main move the Mario Brothers can do, which is Elemental, this is when the game truly opens up, as not only you have a bit more movesets for Mario and Luigi to tackle with, but you can really explore the Bean Bean Kingdom with any way you want. It's recommended to do one of these missions first, but after that you can choose any order you want, which is pretty cool. Although besides the first one you're recommended doing so, find the bean pieces here are surprisingly really easy to do, as one of them is pretty much you going around in circles to find these special fruits to feed to the Yoshis. That way they can lay special neon legs for the theater. And for another one, you're just straight up playing this small little minigame. Which reminds me, there are a lot of minigames you can play through in this game, and you can replay harder versions of the same ones you play through for special prizes, which are really rare to find beans. And you get to see where Donkey Kong has been for the last 10 years. You doing okay, Donkey Kong? Are you okay? Now as for the visuals in this game looks really good for the GBA. I really adore the bright colors and rounded art style this game is going for. It makes all the characters feel pop and they're very damn expressive. One of the strongest aspects I can think of with Alpha Dream games is their strong art style and sprite animations. And I've got to say, Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga has some of the best looking sprites in any Mario game period. Like, I'm not kidding, I feel like the sprites in Superstar Saga are about as iconic as Mario Bros. 3 and World. Especially if you're growing up on the internet in the early 2000s when sprite animations were all the rage. And you see them always using the Mario and Luigi sprites just because how expressive these character sprites are. And even the smaller details I really adore, like every time you win a battle, the victory pose you have will depend on your final blow. So if you defeat the last enemy with a hammer attack, they'll wield out their hammers in the victory pose. And the music in this game is just straight up phenomenal, honestly one of the best GBA soundtracks. Yoko Shimomura did wonders in making the soundtrack come to life. And I feel like most of this has been translated really well for the 3DS remake. And I've got to say, as someone who played the GBA version first and then the 3DS remake after, I've got to say is that they really pretty much recaptured the magic of the original game. Some people say that the 3DS version isn't as expressive as the original game, and I can say that somewhat with Mario and Luigi themselves, but as for the original characters for this remake, I'd say they're about as, if not more expressive and even more animated than the original. Especially with characters like Bowser, which this might be a bit of a hot take, but I never was a big fan of his original sprite in Superstar Saga, as it always looked a bit off to me as he looked more like a gremlin more than Bowser himself. But what really sells me on the 3DS remake's graphics has to be the environments themselves, as I really adore the colors and shimmering that they have in the remake. It looked very mesmerizing, especially with places like Stardust Fields. And the remix soundtrack in this game is honestly out of this world, as some of the most recognized soundtracks in this game has been translated beautifully with new hardware. With my favorite soundtrack being the Welcome to the Bean Bean Kingdom theme, as it just feels very magical. They even improved certain soundtracks that I didn't really like too much, like the ones that try to be a bit more ambient, which ends up being grating in the long run. If you have a Nintendo 3DS, then I highly recommend trying out this remake because it is a wonderful package. And at the time, it was really cool to play every single Mario and Luigi game on one console. But even though I prefer the 3DS version a bit more, I still recommend trying out the GBA version, especially since that one's a lot more accessible. With the only down points I can think of with the remake is the brand new side game that they included in this, where its focus is mostly on Bowser's minions trying to find their master, with the main protagonist of this game being this one Goomba. And honestly, it works really well because considering the fact that Goombas are usually the weakest Mario enemy, That ideology is represented in the story, with the Goombas being pretty much the lower class. So it's basically this one Goomba trying to show himself what they can do. Which that means is that I can technically say that a Goomba got his own game before Waluigi ever did. That's honestly kind of hilarious. And as for the gameplay itself, well, I actually don't know what it is. The battle system is way different from the usual Mario and Luigi gameplay, where the gameplay is completely automatic, where two sides of the team battle out to see who can win. Which isn't a bad idea on paper, but in execution, I thought this was one of the worst battle systems I ever played in a Mario game. This feels like something you would see in a really lackluster Paper Mario game. But despite that, I don't think this one new mode really tampers the remake itself, as it's still just an optional side game, you can just completely ignore it. As the actual remake itself, at the end of the day, is still Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, except it looks nicer and has a lot of refinements from the modern games. Alright, so with everything out of the way, I think it's appropriate to wrap up this adventure. So after getting all the 4 pieces of the Beanstar and putting them back together, Bowletta sends another letter saying to meet her at the Ice Palace called Joke's End. That way they can trade Peach with the Beanstar, but they know how dangerous the Beanstar would be, so instead of just straight up giving her, they decide to make a decoy to trick her into trading Peach. So after heading to the palace and dealing with the owner, they were ready to give Fawful the red herring, but he was able to see through the disguise and steals the actual Beanstar from Luigi. So now that Bowletta has the Beanstar, Mario needs to figure out a plan to get it back as well as Peach. And so when they were able to confront Bowletta and demand to return Peach, of course she wouldn't do her end of the deal and decides to keep Peach. But then another Peach shows up saying the one that Bowletta kidnapped was a fake. And enraged, Bowletta then discards the quote-unquote fake Peach and tries to kidnap the real one. Only to realize once they're up in the sky that they've been duped and it was Luigi in disguise, who not only tricked the witch, but also was able to steal back the Beanstar and escape unharmed. And with Bowletta so enraged, she decides to head to the Mushroom Kingdom to take the entirety of Bowser's castle. And with that, she pulls out another attack on the Bean Bean Kingdom, destroying the entire place again. And so, with no time to spare, Mario and Luigi then heads up all the way to Bowser's castle to stop Cackletta once and for all. After dealing with the surprisingly at the time returned the Koopalings, and dealing with Fawful once and for all, there's only one thing left, and it's taking down Bowletta. So after you defeat the first phase, where Bowletta seems to be defeated, she had one final trick up her sleeve by detonating a bomb near Mario and Luigi, knocking them out cold. And so with them defeated, Bowletta decides to just straight up eat them, by literally just inhaling them and swallowing them whole. And so this leads to the second phase of the final boss, where you defeat Cackletta's ghost itself. And this boss really puts up a fight. I mean, hell, when you start the boss, you only have 1 HP, so you need to dodge their attacks before you can die instantly. And then you need to attack the different body parts so they can expose the weak point. It's pretty damn challenging, but a great way to end this game. And once you deal that final blow, Cackletta is finally defeated. As Bowser restores back to normal and Peaslee shows up saying that he has rigged the whole place to blow up. And after rushing all the way back to the start of the area, Mario and Luigi was able to escape from the exploding castle, with Bowser not so very lucky. And with that, the day is saved and peace has restored back to the Bean Bean Kingdom, with Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Toadsworth saying farewell to the people there, concluding Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. And overall, after 21 years, this game holds up really well. Even though personally it's not my favorite Mario & Luigi game, I still had a really good time playing through this game, as even though this is a very short RPG game, it was still packed with a lot of memorability, and it pretty much became the blueprints of even bigger Mario & Luigi games over the years. And I'm very excited to see this format introduced in a console entry later this year. If you own a Nintendo Switch, then I highly recommend trying this on the NSO app, as it's the most modern way to play through a lot of classic GBA games. But if you still own a Nintendo 3DS, then I highly recommend trying out the remake. As I said earlier, it's a really well made remake, and it really captures the original magic of the game. Plus, since the 3DS is backwards compatible, you can essentially play through the entirety of the Mario & Luigi series under one console. But regardless on which version you play, at the very end of the day, Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga is a pretty good game. Wait, is that Mario Brothers on the